This is a rebellion, right? Well, I rebel. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Jedi Way. I am one of your co-hosts here. I am the outlaw John Rogan. Call me Johnny Andor for today. Joined on this live show by our Laura Kelly, our co-host. How are you, Laura?
Hi, John. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm good. Am I frozen again? Welcome to the internet lately at my place. We're jumping into Rogue One, everyone. We're celebrating the 5-year anniversary of the first trailer being dropped here. This was a Laura Kelly idea. Laura, walk me through your idea for why this occurred to you, why it felt like the right time to talk about it for today.
You know, it kind of felt like the right time to talk about it just because randomly Rogue One will just start trending on Twitter. I don't know why. It'll just randomly happen. And I think I may have seen earlier this week that this was one of those occasions. But I'm always down for an excuse to talk about this movie. It is my favorite Star Wars film of all of the Star Wars films, and there are a lot of them.
Wow.
But this one takes the top for me. So I was really excited to finally have some excuse to have this topic come up. But also it was 6 years ago this month that the first sort of anything we got in terms of teaser trailer things for Rogue One premiered at Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim in 2015. Right. And there wasn't even any actual footage shown. It was just kind of a Rogue One panel, and they talked about some stuff and showed something that's nowhere on the internet. So we can't find it. We can't watch it. We can't watch it now, but that's okay. But yeah, I'll look for any excuse to talk about Rogue One. I don't need any excuse. We're just gonna do it.
I know. I love it too. It's certainly my second favorite film, just behind Empire Strikes Back. And on certain days, I would argue it can go above Empire Strikes Back, depending on my mood. It's even with which we'll get into, obviously, as we talk about the history of Rogue One, even with the studio meddling, even with the changing of the approach to this thing and how they kind of lightened up a little bit of the darkness within the story, allegedly, reportedly, I still think this is an incredible 70s kind of style Star Wars film. And I don't mean 70s like 1977, the original. I mean 70s like grittier, edgier type of Star Wars film that a Star Wars story films were initially supposed to do, is to expand the universe out and show you a different take on Star Wars that isn't what we'd seen in the trilogy films, the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy at that point, and the start with The Force Awakens of the new trilogy. So it was supposed to be something different, out of the mainstream. And you could argue a Star Wars story for some people who like it. I know Laura's a fan of that film, but this is the one that I think kind of really opened the doors to the possibilities of Star Wars. And I think we don't even have The Mandalorian without Rogue One, in my opinion. Some of the elements of Mandalorian without Rogue One getting over so well with the fans.
100%. And I think, one of the things that we'll talk about later is some of those darker, grittier moments in Rogue One and maybe how they tie back to The Mandalorian, which has been so well loved. But yeah, this is one of those movies that when it came out, number one, it was it was kind of the first movie that sort of had a lot of drama happening behind it. Then we, subsequently got a lot more of that. But this was sort of one of the first. And despite all of that, this movie came out and it seemed to be overall very well received. I feel like it's very rare that people don't like this film, or at least can't see the value in it in some way. So it really was a great start to what was supposed to be a series of anthology films. And then, I think it was supposed to be the Boba Fett film was supposed to be sort of in this, included in Rogue One and this Solo film as well. But, the fact that after Solo sort of underperformed and all of the drama that happened behind the scenes with that film, they ended up doing away with the anthologies. And that was kind of disappointing to me, because if they could have found a way to sort of rework that magic that we got out of this film in particular, we could have gotten some really, really great Star Wars stories. And so that piece of it's a little bit disappointing, I think.
That's for sure. 1,000% for sure. And we know a lot of people who are watching us live right now or might be watching us later are fans of Rogue One or have strong opinions of Rogue One. The Streamlabs and the Super Chats are open for tonight. We're going live. Might even bring some of you all in live later on in the show if there's time. But we're going to do deep dive into Rogue One, talk about so many things. So if you want to chime in, have your comment read, have it responded to, the best way to do that is through the Super Chat and the Streamlabs. I'm going to put the Streamlabs address in the chat right now, and I will pin it so you will be able to know where to go for that overall. So that's just letting you know there. So look for that in the chat in just a few seconds. But that's how we want to get your support tonight from all of you as we dive in deep into Rogue One. Laura Kelly, where shall we start first?
Well, let's talk about the very beginning of the film, because I think one of the most interesting things that we get in this film is sort of a flashback almost. We don't get a ton of flashbacks in Star Wars. It's just not a commonly used storytelling device in the galaxy far, far away. But we get this sort of back in time shot of Jyn Erso as I think she's 6 years old, or I think she's 8 years old, actually. At the very beginning of this film, and we have the family, Lyra and Galen, on Lamu. Lamu is the name of the planet. Sorry, I was just watching some Clone Wars stuff when I had Lamasu on the brain. Lamu is the name of the planet that they're on at the beginning of this film. And then Krennic approaching in his shuttle. And I remember reading somewhere that the sort of like start of this film, the way that it sort of like is taking place on this farm, was sort of inspired by. Now I'm drawing a blank on it now that I'm supposed to be talking about it out loud, but it was inspired by something. So there's your fun fact for the day. But yeah, it was sort of an interesting storytelling device that they brought in this phase. And then we see it again when they actually flash back to a scene in Coruscant. Trivia nerds, beware. If they ask you how many films are shown in Star Wars or Rogue One, you have to say Coruscant too, because it's in there in a flashback. But I actually do love that they included that, not only because it was just interesting to see the different ways that Lyra and Galen lived, but also because we got to see an even younger version of Jyn. That was a different actress that was playing her in that flashback. And funny enough, it was the younger sister of the girl that played her at 8 years old at the very beginning of the film.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay. But also the beginning of the film shows you a very sparse landscape, wide shots with not a lot in them. So you can tell this is a film that's approaching Star Wars from a different point of view. The shades of it are even darker from the beginning in the flashback and what have you. The sounds, those new troopers, those dark troopers that are there, all of it just absolutely puts you in a mindset that this is going to be a harder-edged Star Wars story that they're telling. And, of course, everything that happens with the Ersos and Krennic during that opening sequence, this connective tissue between them, they were once, co-workers, friends even, and what that all leads to as the Empire has corrupted Krennic from the inside out, and so we see that already from the beginning, that being shown to us. And another orphan child, another child that loses her parents, or his parents, as we saw with Luke, kind of the beginning of that. And certainly, Laura, you could argue, I saw someone talk about this the other day, how Jyn is essentially Leia, Luke, and Han Solo rolled into one person. And it would be hard to argue against that description of her for sure.
I never gave that any thought. And I really like that description of Jyn. I think that works really well, that she is sort of all of those characters combined. But then she also kind of brings like her own gumption or something to the world too that we hadn't seen before. But I think when I was trying to think of, topics to talk about on this episode, one of the things I thought of was like, it's almost Mother's Day. Maybe we can talk about moms in Star Wars. And then I realized that's going to be a very short conversation, because it's all just like Padme dead, Shmi dead, Han's mom non-existent. And then we've got Lyra, of course, at the beginning of this film, dead. Everybody just dies tragically. And there's nothing to go with there. So yeah, we do have a very young Jyn Erso that is essentially orphaned at the beginning of this film. And then jumps in Saw Gerrera, who then of course abandons her again later too. So it's just sort of this series of abandonments that Jyn experiences throughout her life. And we get a lot more of this in the novel, the novelization of the film, but Jyn sort of spends a lot of time in her head thinking about her dad, and even as an adult, and thinking about how he's a traitor and he's a bastard and he works for the Empire and he's building weapons for them. Like, she has it in her mind essentially that he abandoned her too, almost willingly, even though we know as the audience that that's certainly not the case. Yeah, for sure. And it's so funny because, I mean, there's so much about this film right from the beginning that teases
an even darker film than we got, as I've said already twice now on the show. And certainly that first trailer kind of gave us an idea of what we might have gotten had Gareth Edwards' approach to this been fully taken all the way to the end before Tony Gilroy came in and made the changes and adjustments, which he vehemently believes were the right choices for this tale, much like Lord Miller were kind of removed from what they were doing and replaced by Ron Howard. Not as extreme, obviously, but certainly both of these Star Wars stories have that similarity to them, Laura, that someone else comes in on the tail end of the production of a film and changes some of the elements of it. You could argue the results one way or the other, but I think it does work out for Rogue One, but it always leaves us with this possibility of what could have been as well. And that whole beginning gives us that, because we see Saw Gerrera as a young man, and then we jump years later to Saw Gerrera now has the hair and he's all this. But of course, that isn't how he originally was in the first teaser trailer for this this film. He didn't have that hair, and he was still of that age in the first teaser trailer.
Exactly. And he didn't seem to be quite as, I guess we really didn't get a full body shot of him, but he didn't seem to be quite as beat up and robotic as we see in the final film. He also was bald and just seemed to have a little bit, like, he seemed to have his wits about him a little bit more, seemed to have, not that you could ever describe Saw Gerrera as not having, you know, conviction, but he just didn't seem quite as crazed in sort of the way that he certainly comes off, and paranoid the way that he comes up in the final film. So it definitely would have been interesting to see, I think, what was the original intention, I think, of his character. But I think you're right in that you definitely can kind of see where some of the darker elements are, and where things sometimes, I mean, you can even see sometimes in like different characters' hairstyles and the length of their hair where things were certainly reshot. And sometimes it's maybe, you know, not so clear to tell what came from what, but I know for a fact, like Jyn Erso's hair changes sometimes from scene to scene, and Ben Mendelsohn's hair is a little bit longer in some scenes. So it's definitely interesting to go back and do a closer rewatch of this film in particular.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to jump into the stuff you've got laid out here on this rundown? Anything you want to jump in first, or do you want to keep going through the movie? What's your preference here?
Well, let's jump into some of these things that I have in this outline here, and then we can definitely talk about more aspects of the film as they come up. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the 2015 Rogue One teaser that was shown at Celebration Anaheim had no actual footage of the film in that. I think at that point they'd only been filming for maybe 2 months or something, or they had just had Felicity Jones sign on, I think, as Jyn. So maybe they hadn't even started filming yet. But the trailer, from what I understand, had the voice of Alec Guinness. And there was some choppy audio of screaming pilots, and that was sort of the exclusive look that people at Celebration got that year. But one interesting fact, I as I was searching desperately on the internet for this trailer, one interesting fact I came across was that Gareth Edwards apparently met Alan Tudyk at that celebration that year, and that is when he offered him the role of K2SO. So there was definitely, I think, a little magic in the air happening there. We still had Gareth Edwards fully on board. That's the other unfortunate thing about this, is that I'd be willing to bet he probably wouldn't return to Star Wars. Like, I'd like to think he would, but after all of the things went down with this film being reshot, I bet he won't, and that's just too bad. Yeah,
maybe under different stewardship, like we saw with Zack Snyder. You never say never. You know, the people in charge of Warner Brothers changed hands a couple times, and Zack was able to come back because those people who had kind of ushered him out weren't there anymore. So maybe down the road, not that I advocate for Kathleen Kennedy leaving in any way, shape, or form, but maybe down the road, Gareth Edwards will come back if it kind of changes hands and who's running things. So you never say never in this town. That's for damn sure. Well, in that town, now that I'm not there anymore. But also, we should touch on some of the stuff, because from the article you got clicked here or connected here, Obi-Wan Kenobi talks over this, says, for more than 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic, before the dark times, before the Empire. According to this description, the camera is tracking over, it looks like a jungle setting, soaring high above the trees before tilting to look up into the sky. I think I remember seeing a bootleg of this way back when when it was on Twitter. I remember this scene specifically. We might have even talked about it on Collider, on the Jedi Council on Collider over there, if I remember correctly. You can hear a TIE fighter passing overhead in the distance. The Death Star slowly comes into focus. As the title treatment comes up, you can hear voices assuredly of X-Wing pilots barking orders over the radios. The screen cuts to black. Shout out to Cinema Bland and my friend Sean O'Connell for writing this article. But yeah, so a great description of what we initially saw. So again, Laura, this idea, a lone ship up there, seeing all this madness, and then what it leads to, this massive Death Star. And I'll say this, Death Star. And I'll say this, the Death Star has never looked more beautiful, if I can even use that word, than it does in Rogue One, for God's sakes.
It really does. It's definitely, it's like, that's an interesting way to describe it as beautiful when you talk about something like the Death Star, but it really was. It was so cool. And some of the ways that they used shadow and lighting in that film, they did. And obviously, some of those things are not extremely realistic. There wouldn't be any light shining over the Death Star if we were actually in space. But it did make for a really cool cut and a real cool shot in these trailers and in the film. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for this article, because this is the only thing we're going to get out of this. But I did come across a few articles that had like old videos that looked like they had been taken down or blocked since they were initially put up. And we're about 6 years too late trying to look for it, unfortunately.
The mouse is strong. The mouse is strong. It does not play. That's for sure. All right, but should we watch the first trailer, or do you want to go into other stuff and then we can circle back to the first trailer? What are you feeling?
We can jump into the first trailer, or at least one of the trailers that we found. Let's do that. Yeah, let's
take a look at this thing, and once I pull it up here and see if we can have some fun enjoying the first trailer that was dropped, that had teased, as we've said before already, a darker film from Star Wars. Let me bring it up for you all. I got to share the screen and share the audio and all of that. And then we'll and please remember to send in your Streamlabs and Super Chats. I see already a Super Chat in here. So if you have questions about Rogue One or ideas about Rogue One you want to share with us, send it in. All right, here we go. And let me know if you can't hear it.
State your name for the record.
Jin Erso.
Forgery of imperial documents, possession of stolen property, aggravated assault, resisting arrest.
On your own from the age of 15, reckless, aggressive, and undisciplined.
This is a rebellion, isn't it? I rebel.
I love that line.
I hate it.
Listen to the beats.
The test is imminent. We need to know what it is and how to destroy it.
Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
This is my alarm when I wake up, by the way. There he is, Saul without hair.
What will you do when they catch you? What will you do if they break you? If you continue to fight, what will you become?
Damn. It would have been something, you guys. It would have been something. Oh, funny though. Funny enough, that last shot with Felicity Jones just kind of like turning and looking at the camera. Apparently, that was like not anything I think that was ever supposed to be in the film. It was just like something that happened while they were setting up a scene or something. And Gareth Edwards liked the shot, so he was just gonna. He just decided to use it in the trailer.
It was perfect in the trailer. Yeah, absolutely. So, as Laura said earlier, you get Saw Gerrera. He has got a shaved head. He does not sound anywhere near as vocally challenged as he sounds in Rogue One. We get these darker beats. The music is boom, boom, this pulsating drum beat throughout that's massive. We see the Death Star moving, and we see Jin be more rebellious, for lack of a better term, but certainly less of a being brought along and more of a wanting to take control kind of situation. And that scene with the TIE fighter coming up as she walks to the edge to adjust the radar there, that isn't in the movie. And that was an awesome scene. We see her walk across the bridge, but that TIE fighter never comes up. So it's so much about this opening first trailer that I saw, or that we saw right back then, was so exciting to think about the possibilities, and hardly any of those shots end up in the film.
Exactly. But I think one of the things that I still like about this trailer, in addition to sort of it being like deleted scenes and extra footage, it's still it pretty much conveys the kind of feeling of Rogue One. It's a little bit darker for sure than maybe what we ended up with. But I think that it basically accomplishes the mission that it needs to accomplish, in that it conveys the feeling you're going to get from the film, and it makes you excited for it. Yeah. It certainly did its job in that respect. So it's a cool trailer. I really do enjoy that. I love the sort of like slightly different attitude we get about Jyn Erso. Yeah. Or from Jyn Erso in this movie. Like, she's not quite as like grumpy, I think, at like the beginning, especially in that interrogation scene on Yavin with General Draven and with Mon Mothma. It's a little bit more like just attitude forward, a little bit more smart mouth, more so than, just kind of being grumpy and wanting to be anywhere else.
Yeah, agree with that 1,000%. Also, we don't get much. We just get with the back to tank. We don't get to see that throughout the movie, which is a nice tease as well, and just some of the overall action going on. We miss out on some of that when we watch the movie, the original. Not the original, but the movie that did come out with Rogue One. So tell me why you hate this line. Why do you hate I Rebel? I almost bought a T-shirt that had the line on it because I loved it so much. Tell me why it bothers you. Yes,
I just think it's so stupid. And I think it's funny because somebody else in the chat was just like, yeah, I'm glad that they cut that line. And I'm happy to see that there are others that agree with me. But, it's just one of those things that's a little bit too on the nose for me. It's like, we've always known from the beginning, it's like they're called the Rebellion and they are the rebels and the rebels against the Empire. And then we throw in this line of I rebel. It's too on the nose, and it just seems so dumb to me. To each their own, though. I'm sure there's a T-shirt out there for you somewhere, John. You could probably find one on Etsy or something.
Oh, I'm sure I'll get one. That's for sure. Mormoth Haunts says, R1 is my favorite Disney Star Wars movie. Can't wait for the Andor series. Also love Diego Luna. Yeah, that's another part of this. Laura, I don't mean to be jumping around, but that's a great point Mormoth Haunts brings up. For me as a Latino, like, we don't get to be in sci-fi stuff. We don't really get to be leads in any of the sci-fi stuff in the franchises or whatever. That's changing, obviously. But me growing up, you rarely ever saw that. Jimmy Smith is one of the first times you saw a Latino, then Edward James almost in Battlestar Galactica. So those are those things you held on to. But it wasn't until Diego, in my opinion, came forward. Then, of course, Oscar Isaac after him. And then, of course, Pedro Pascal in The Mandalorian. So, but I loved seeing Diego step into this role so powerfully as a lead in this role opposite Felicity Jones, and what he was able to do with that character, how he was able to convey that character, and the battle that they have verbally on the ship when he says, I've been fighting this battle since I was a kid. You have no idea the stuff I had to go through. And when he shoots that dude in the beginning of the movie, near the beginning of the movie, you understand this is a person who is willing to do what it takes to accomplish the mission, because the stakes are bigger than any kind of pseudo morality you might have about what's happening in the world. So I appreciated the guts of casting someone like Diego Luna into a role that rarely gets given to a Latino actor.
Exactly. This film is particularly diverse, I think, especially in all of its leads and the sort of main six of the Rogue One squad, which I think was really welcoming for a lot of people. And it was really cool to get to see Diego Luna, I think, in this role. I think a lot of people probably knew him best from Dirty Dancing 2, I think was maybe one of his more popular roles before this. At least that's what I knew him from, honestly. But I enjoyed seeing him in this role a lot. I think he had a lot of fun. Like you see him doing interviews and talking about how much he loves Jabba in particular for some reason, and how big of a Star Wars fan that he's been his entire life. So I can only imagine like the thrill he must have gotten out of being in this film, and then to be invited back to get to like come and play in Star Wars and be in that sandbox for an extended amount of time in this new show, Andor. I can't imagine how exciting that must be for him. For sure.
We've got some Streamlabs that have come through. Laura, let's get through those, and then we'll jump into the next section of our conversation here. Justin Toner he said, "Hi, John and Laura. I really enjoyed Rogue One more than I expected. The characters got me invested even when I knew they were not going to make it. The Vader hallway scene is epic. Battle of Scarif is one of the best battles in the franchise, in my opinion." Yeah, thanks, Justin, for the donation. Laura, what do you think about this? What he said, the hallway scene with Vader and the Scarif battle. Would you agree with Justin that is one of the best in the franchise? And what was your feeling the first time you saw the hallway scene?
100%. I definitely agree. Scarif for me was a particularly cool planet. I don't know if even in the prequels, I don't think we'd really had like a tropical planet like this. Yeah. From what I understand, they filmed a lot of this in the Maldives, and that must have just been a beautiful location to be stuck on for an extended amount of time. But I just thought that was such a very cool, it was almost like kind of a cool juxtaposition of having this like very industrial complex and having all these trains and all this metal around, and then also seeing this gorgeous beach and the like clear water and the palm trees. It was kind of a weird out of body experience to sort of be on Scarif and I don't know. It was just interesting. The Vader hallway scene is one of those scenes that for me, a lot of people talk about it in terms of like fan service. And it's one of those scenes for me that I just love. And I don't mind if you want to call it fan service. You can, sure, it is fan service maybe a little bit, but I liked to be serviced sometimes as a fan. And this is one of those scenes I particularly enjoyed. I thought it was really cool. And part of it was because I followed a lot of the like kind of, I think I followed a lot of the marketing leading up to the release of this film. And so I followed all the spoilers. Any spoiler that came out, I read it. I wanted to know everything, which ended up being one of those things that I kind of regretted later because I ended up getting something spoiled that I kind of wish I hadn't. Right. But this Vader hallway scene, I never got wind of this. And so when I got to see that on screen for the first time on opening night with a group of 9 of my friends, like the third row of the theater, I was just so thrilled. And it's crazy because you go from being this really, really tragic scene right before that to this hallway scene that is incredibly like epic and violent and just over the top. And so it's just kind of the last, I think, 5 minutes of the film just take you on this really herky-jerky ride and ends up just leaving you exhausted by the time that it's over. But it's at the same time, it's so thrilling and so fun. So I really enjoyed the Vader hallway scene. I enjoyed it the first time I watched it, and I enjoyed the last time I watched it, which was about 5 minutes before we started.
I agree with you 100%. You know, it's interesting when you look at that scene too, because you are cheering on the rebels through that whole Battle of Scarif against the Empire. But then when Vader shows up, you're kind of quietly cheering for Vader to have a badass sequence where he's killing all these rebels who you were just cheering for. So it's such an interesting thing to do to the audience, and it totally 1000% works. They've used Vader really, really well since the new regime has kind of taken over. Loved him, as we said in the Rogue One thing, loved his appearances in Rebels. They've done a really good job. The comic book itself, when he's shown up in the actual full-length books like that, they've done a really good job. They have had a rare misstep with Vader. So I've enjoyed that. And I was doing a little research before we started doing the show. I hope I'm right on this. Gary Whitta apparently had written a scene, or there'd been a scene where Vader did that not in the hallway, but down on Scarif, that apparently he led the troops down in Scarif and was mowing through the rebels. So it might have been him mowing through Baze Malbus and Chirrut Imwe and Riz Ahmed's character. He might have been doing all of that through, and that would have been an even more powerful thing to do the audience, because you're like, this is badass, but I'm not supposed to be cheering for this guy, guys. I love these characters. And it would have maybe reaffirmed this idea that you're not supposed to like Vader. He has killed millions of people, yet he has this kind of charm to him that people just are in awe of that character throughout the history of Star Wars fandom. So it's very interesting to see him used in this way. But I think they used it perfectly for the film they made, I think. So clearly he was going to mow down rebels no matter what version of the film you were going to get.
Yeah, but in this one, he just mowed down a bunch of nameless rebels that we don't know about or care about, so it's fine. But yeah, I think one of the things with Vader in particular in this movie, I think they used him really well, because they didn't overuse him in a way where he distracted from these main characters that we don't get a lot of time with. When you're talking about the trilogy films, we're spending 3 movies with the main characters, getting to know them and empathize with them and root for them. In something like this, we had like 2 hours to get to know these characters and like try and find a way to relate to them in a way where we normally get to sort of slow down with those processes when we're watching a Star Wars film. So I think they did a really good job. They didn't distract from them. This was their movie. And I think that they used Vader really well, and just enough. I think it was just enough. It wasn't over the top for me. Some people might say too much. That's fine. Not for me. I think it was great.
Did you not like? A lot of people didn't like your choke on your ambitions. I liked it. I liked it, but I know a lot of people didn't like it because, I mean, he's still Anakin, and Anakin can be a dick, and he's kind of a dick in that moment. So,
yeah,
did that bother you when you saw it in the movie?
I don't think so. That was one of those things I was kind of surprised to read like the next day of people being like, did Vader use like a pun in this movie? And I was like, oh yeah, he did, didn't he? But I really didn't mind, honestly. Yeah, it was a little bit like mustache twirling, cartoony villain type of line, but like, I don't know. I was kind of here for it. I didn't mind.
I was here for it too. I enjoy the hell out of that thing. All right, Curbside Prophet, thank you very much for the kind donation. Curbside Prophet, he says, I remember that teaser. I was in the audience at Celebration, and it was so good. Rogue One had some of the realest human characters, and I think that's why people connect so much to it. Wish people were more excited for Andor. As a Mexican man, I can't wait. Yeah, great point. With Diego being Mexican, heritage there. Laura, are you here? I'm curious by Curbside Prophet's comments. Are you hearing that people aren't excited about Andor? Because I am on the edge of my seat waiting for this thing. You're more, ingrained in the Star Wars fandom than I am at this point. Do you hear the same things, that it's not getting as much publicity or hype in the fandom?
I don't think that people aren't excited for it. I think what you just said, and that it's not getting as much hype at the moment, is probably more correct. And I think it's just because there's a little bit more emphasis on Obi-Wan for whatever reason. Probably because it's supposed to be, I thought I heard that it's supposed to maybe come out first, but that doesn't make a lot of sense because Cassian's been filming for so much longer.
It has been, yeah.
So I would think that that's going to come out next. But I think that there's just been a little bit more publicity maybe sort of drummed up by fans. Like, you look at the subreddit prequel memes. People have been dying for Ewan McGregor to come back as Obi-Wan for years, for years. And so I think that there's just a lot of excitement in particular around that show. So I think that that's probably why. We also have like a novel of Obi-Wan that's Legends now, but I think a lot of people are sort of speculating with each cast announcement, like, oh, is this person maybe going to be playing like this? Is the novel going to actually be brought into the canon a little bit in certain ways? So I think there's just a little bit more buzz around it at the moment, especially now that we got that cast announcement. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. We haven't gotten, most of the stuff we've gotten about Andor, I think, have been like leaks. I don't think a lot of it has been like formally announced. We had Kathleen Kennedy talking at the Star Wars the Disney Investor Day about some of the cast. But before that, and then even since then, most of the cast stuff that we've got have been leaks. They're just, it doesn't seem like Lucasfilm is putting a lot of effort at this point into promoting it, the focus for whatever reason seems to be on Obi-Wan. So I would be willing to bet like this show might end up flying under the radar for a lot of people. Like I really was not excited about The Mandalorian when we first heard about that story. I mean, I stand corrected. Like, hello, look at my shirt. So it's one of those things where I think that people, if they're going in with lower expectations, there really can't be anything that goes wrong with that. And maybe this is one of those characters that people, you really can't say that they don't care about him because they know that he dies. It's like, same with Obi-Wan, same with Anakin. Like you have the same situation with both of those characters. So I don't think that there's any reason to not be excited about this show. I just, for whatever reason, they seem to be downplaying it a little bit for now.
Yeah, and the filming is taking place. We got a report about 12 hours ago here. It is taking place in Cleveleys, which is near Blackpool for this series. That's the rumor happening here. Pinewood Studios declined to confirm what was being shot there, but a Scruffy Diamond, a YouTuber there, had a drone camera and shot some footage of these pieces of the set being moved into these studios, and it looked very similar to what we might be seeing for the world of Cassian Andor, which is of course out of the Rogue One world as well. So, and Stellan Skarsgård's already hyping up the series himself. There's rumors about the ships that we might be seeing in Andor series. You can find all this stuff out over the last few days on these websites to see what you want to see. But like Laura, I caution you, if you get too if you start pursuing too many of these, you're bound to get spoiled by something, and you might not be happy about it in the end. So proceed with caution. That's what I'll say. Proceed with caution. All right. Justin Toner sent another one. Said, thanks for replaying the original teaser trailer with all the footage that was cut out of the reshoot. Do you think they will ever release it on Blu-ray, or will it be locked up in the Disney vault forever? Oh, that's a great question. Laura, do you think they have the guts to release this thing uncut or with deleted scenes at any point down the road? Given the success of Zack Snyder's Justice League, is this, I know that's Warner Brothers, not Disney, but is there any kind of influence do you think that might have?
It really is a good question. I don't have a great answer because I kind of think the answer is no. Lucasfilm just kind of operates as like a different beast altogether from DC, and I don't see it happening, unfortunately. And I wish that weren't the case, because I'm as curious as anybody to see some of the things that would have been cut from this, or see a different cut of this film. Unfortunately, I don't see it as realistic as a move that Lucasfilm would make. Whether or not that's for the best, I don't know. I think it probably is, because, you really don't want to have a bunch of people saying like, oh, like once you open that box, it doesn't stop. Then you've got people screaming about The Last Jedi again, and about the prequels probably. And I mean, God only knows. This is Star Wars 1313 that was never released, and under all of these things. I don't want to open the box, so I would think that they probably don't either.
The JJ cut. Where's the JJ cut? Yeah, that's a great point, because certainly Warner Brothers is now dealing with the backlash of how good Zack Snyder's Justice League was received, with people with that hashtag restore the Snyderverse. So yeah, I'm sure Disney notoriously does not like to be told what to do by the fans, does not like to be hassled by the fans. So certainly I imagine they wouldn't want to open the door. That being said, Gary Witt is over here dropping concept or commenting on concept art that's being dropped by someone who worked on the production. So interesting situation. That's how Zach did it, dropping little things on Vero. So who knows? Of course, he's not dropping, who's commenting on them, but you never know. Dagan says, hey, John and Laura, how do you feel about the original ending they had in the script where Andor and Jyn escape and have a happy ending? I think it would have tarnished the character development and wouldn't have made sense for the overall series arc. Yeah, what do you think? Should they have kept the original ending and let them live?
I think it definitely makes sense that it wouldn't fit with the rest of the Star Wars films. I mean, Rogue One takes place like a couple of days, maybe a week or so before A New Hope, and it's the same thing with Rebels. You got to figure out like what's the excuse of why these characters aren't in A New Hope or aren't in the original trilogy, right? Because you would think Cassian of all people would be bound to pop up at some point. So you have to always, I think they are always thinking of how they have to work around these things. Yeah. And I think they just didn't think that Disney would have the guts to greenlight a film where every character dies at the very end of it. So I totally understand why there was why there were other endings planned. But I think maybe from the beginning, originally they really wanted to let these characters go out with a bang, for lack of better terms. So I'm glad that they ended up going that way. I'm glad that they had the courage to take this children's movie, Star Wars that has now become so much bigger than it could have been. And just sort of, let it grow and let it evolve and let it explore new places and new genres and things like that. I think that was kind of a big step. So I'm grateful that they did it. And I remember reading at one point that there was maybe a version of the script where there was like a wedding at the end of the film. And I remember being like, what? Like, that would not work in my mind at all. It just made me so much happier with the ending that we got in this movie. I really can't complain, but it would be interesting to know what some of the other ideas were, for sure.
Yeah, I love the ending. I was watching a video from Looper, and they were talking about, well, if Jyn Erso had lived, there's a possibility she could have even been in a love triangle with Han Solo and Leia. That would have been super interesting to play that out. Although you imagine she'd have stayed with Cassian or ended up with Cassian at some point, but you never know. It's a rebellion. People die in a rebellion. So who knows what would have happened going forward. Cassian would have certainly been, I agree with you, Laura, Cassian would have certainly been a part of the rebellion in A New Hope and been someone leading an entire crew of people into battle for sure. So, I think they did the right thing. And I think this is the decision they had to make. There was no choice in it, really, since these characters do not pop up again. And I think this is one of the reasons why you love the movie so much, because they do die. And so if you take it out, I think you take out a huge part of why the movie is so beloved by the people it is beloved by, because you only get these 2 hours with these people. That's it. And you don't get to have more. Of course, we will with the Andor series, will be a prequel and what have you. But, these 2 hours with the majority of those characters that we don't get to see again, it makes it special in some way. Do you know what I'm saying? So I love that. Let's see. We got one more here. Hi, John. This is from 156 Impulse. Laura Kelly, huge fan. Question: do you think we will see Yoda in the ObiWan TV show? And how brutal do you think the fight will be between Vader and Obi-Wan? Will we see Vader's mask broken, and will we see his face like in Rebels? Thanks, guys. Yeah, what do you think there, Laura? Will we see Yoda in the ObiWan TV show? And how brutal is the fight going to be between Obi-Wan and Vader?
Yoda is an interesting question, because I almost kind of wonder if that's the kind of character that they would want to use more sparingly. I mean, we heard him in Rise of Skywalker and we heard him in The Force Awakens, but the fact that we actually saw him in The Last Jedi was extremely surprising to me at the time.
Yeah.
I remember just being shocked that they would bring that character in. My first viewing, it felt a little fan servicey. But then in, subsequent viewings, I was like, okay, I can see and fully understand how this really works for the story. And I think that there are ways that it could really work for the story that they're going to try and tell in the Kenobi show. I think that relationship is there. They were like the last two Jedi to actually that we see interact on screen in Revenge of the Sith before they go their separate ways. And they're the only ones that sort of maybe probably didn't know where the other one was going. But although I guess Yoda would have known where Obi-Wan was headed with Luke.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's a very real possibility now that you mention it. I think that he's bound to show up, but I bet it'll be a surprise. They're not going to tell us or show it in a trailer. But so we'll see. With the Vader Anakin fight, I still am just so confused as to how this is going to be executed. So in terms of it being epic or not, is not even something that crossed my mind. I'm sure it will be. I mean, we saw how hard the two of them trained together in the prequels and how great the sword fighting in those films turned out. So I think it'll definitely be, without question, it'll be amazing. I just am really curious, is it going to be a flashback? Is it going to be is it going to happen off of Tatooine? Are we going to see Vader back on Tatooine, even though we know that that was one of the reasonings that they like wanted to bring Luke to his family, because they're like, well, Vader's not coming back here. There's too much sand here. Like, it's just one of those things where I haven't fully figured out how and why they would be bringing Vader into this story. Like, I understand why, because he's the major villain in the storyline during this time period in the galaxy, but it just is. I just haven't gotten that far yet. Okay. You know, I need to see like a trailer or something before or like hear some of the story ideas or read a description of an episode or something before I can be like, oh, I bet they do it this way. Like, that'll get the ball rolling for me. But for now, I'm just like, I don't know. What do you think, John? What are you thinking about this, about Yoda and about Obi-Wan and Anakin?
Well, I think it would be surprising to see Yoda show up. But then again, you know, like we referenced that great story in Certain Point of View, Empire Strikes Back, where Ben is kind of having those internal conversations with Yoda in a way. And so it would be fun to see Yoda come back in that kind of form, you know, and like we saw with Luke and Yoda in The Last Jedi, like the conversation they have. There's a long history of that in Star Wars. So will he come back and will he show up in some way, have this kind of council conversation, not as a Force ghost, obviously, because he's still alive, but have this council conversation with Kenobi? It's possible. Why wouldn't he reach out to one of his masters, or one of his revered elders, rather, in the Jedi, you know, after having spent time with him in the prequel trilogy, and having Yoda fully admit that they messed up, and then of course all through the time that they have with Rebels. So there's certainly a very, very strong relationship between Obi-Wan and Kenobi that would not be out of the realm of possibility to have Yoda show up. That being said, I agree with you. I think they like to use Yoda sparingly, even more sparingly than they use Darth Vader. I think they like to use Yoda in that way, so his effect never loses, or his appearance never loses the effect on you as a fan. So I think that's absolutely true. I think they probably won't. We won't see him, and if we do, it's like maybe a quick scene of conversation overall. But as far as I think the Kenobi, if that happens, the Kenobi Vader fight, of course it'll be dirty and bloody and gritty and fierce as hell. It has to. Both of these men. I mean, if it's the next time he sees him since he's had his limbs separated from his body and burnt to a crisp, there's a little bit of anger there. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's going to be some residue anger that he's got to work out. Anakin, not really known for seeing a therapist and working out his shit, so he's going to work out. Working out his stuff on Kenobi. So I imagine it'll be a pretty brutal fight if they let the fight happen. There's no guarantee there's going to be a fight. I know people will want to see it, but there's no guarantee there's going to be a fight. So, anyway, let's move forward here, ladies and gentlemen. Keep sending in your Streamlabs and Super Chats as we go along. Laura, you know, looking at the rundown here, Rogue One you have here began a legacy of on-set drama. Let's talk about that a little bit as we move forward talking about this film.
Exactly. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting, especially as I look back on it, I think with Rogue One, they tried to be a little bit more subtle about the fact that Gareth Edwards wasn't replaced. He still got credit as the director of the film. Yeah. But essentially, Tony Gilroy was brought in to do a lot of reshoots. And it kind of, from what we can see, he ended up really, I think, making a lot of changes to the story and to the film that Gareth Edwards intended to release. So I think that it's one of those things where I think that they probably made him an offer in a way to Gareth Edwards to be like, look, we can like reshoot the entire thing and like not give you any credit for the film, or we can reshoot a lot of it and still give you credit, and you can keep your mouth shut about it. And unfortunately, you know, I mean, or maybe I guess fortunately for him, you know, he's still someone in the game and still got credited for the film, but I think a lot of this was not his vision, which is unfortunate. And it's just one of those things that I just don't feel like it was as talked about as, say, like Mark Hamill openly disagreeing with Rian Johnson and talking about that in an interview. It was disagreeing with story choices that Rian Johnson made when writing The Last Jedi. I think that this was just a little bit more kind of subtle, but it is just interesting how it sort of opened up a Pandora's box, that this was sort of the first film we saw end up having a little bit of director turnover, and then we kept seeing it time and time again.
Yeah.
In Star Wars, we even saw Colin, Trevorrow leave episode 9.
Right.
And then the struggle to sort of find a new director for that. So I think I just wonder what happened. Like, where was the miscommunication? And like, where did he had to have at some point communicated, like, this is the intention I'm going, this is the intended story I'm going for. Here's the script. They approved it. And then watched it and decided that they didn't like it. Like, I don't understand like what happened. Yeah. And that's, I think, where it's a little bit frustrating, because if it's now happened time and time again, is this going to continue to happen? Like, would we eventually see someone like Jon Favreau walk away from The Mandalorian because of whatever drama has happened on the sets of these films that have come out in recent years?
Yeah. Well, certainly if you believe one side of the fence, Gina Carano saying that Jon Favreau fought to keep her on the show here before she was ultimately let go from the show. That's a possibility. If that was true, that's maybe a point of contention that was had here, even in The Mandalorian, as you mentioned. So certainly not. Certainly, Star Wars is not immune to this drama, and has an unusual amount of drama actually around its movies and the end results. Certainly, bringing JJ back after the reception to The Last Jedi, I think that was purposeful. And Trevorrow having that bad film come out kind of gave them the opportunity to move on from him. The shield, or the cover they needed to move on from him, where the fans wouldn't rebel themselves about it. And bringing JJ back was way to kind of appease the fans, because the fans really loved The Force Awakens, felt he should have done, a lot of the people feel he should, well, how can I quantify this? There are certain segments of Star Wars fans who felt he should have directed all 3 films, even though that wasn't the case for the original trilogy. I always have to remind people of that. And, he bringing him back was a way to appease. But in the end, what did we get? A lot of people didn't like what we got at the end with The Rise of Skywalker. So it was like kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And there are people now who are defending Solo in larger numbers than before, Laura. So that's even getting reevaluated now. So are we saying we validate the decisions that Kathleen Kennedy made? And Bob, I imagine Bob Iger had a lot to do with this as well, because Rogue One made $1 billion. And now this Make Solo 2 Happen thing is happening. You were just in a radio play, or teleplay for this as well. So this possibility is building as well about Alden Ehrenreich coming back as Solo some point down the road. We've got a Lando series coming. So I don't know. It seems to have worked out for them, even though it feels uncomfortable that there's so much of this around this franchise.
Exactly. And, I think we have Emilia Clarke that's going to be stepping into a role in the Marvel, in a Marvel series. So she's coming back to Disney as well. So I would be willing to bet that there is maybe some mending fences that could be going on behind the scenes a little bit. But I think, and, I understand how people wanted to see that Lord and Miller version of Solo. I bet it was really funny. I mean, we've seen the content that Lord and Miller have released, where they did get credited as directors, and it's funny stuff. So I totally imagine that their film would have been fun to watch. But in a way, it's like, we know that Lawrence Kasdan has been with Star Wars for so long, since the original trilogy, and the fact that he set foot on set one day and saw that they weren't filming his script, that would have been really upsetting. That's not somebody whose toes you can just go around like stepping on and doing your own thing and having your actors improvise. So I fully understand the decision. I thought that it was a weird decision to bring Lord Miller into Star Wars in the first place.
A good point. Especially with Solo, especially a character like Solo.
Exactly. So I think what we got out of Solo, I was really a fan of personally. And I get that not everybody was, and that's fine. But I don't think that Lord and Miller would have desperately given us a better film than Ron Howard did. I like what we got out of him. So, but this really that was by far, I think, the biggest explosion when we heard that there were troubles on set. And then we heard the final, they've walked away from creative differences. That was sort of the biggest, I think, drama that we've had in terms of behind the scenes action that we all know of, at least as fans. Who knows what else is really going on? I can just imagine. I mean, like, so many of these directors, I imagine, bring in so many of their own crew, and then to have that whole thing be reshuffled when you've almost finished shooting this film. And then that's when they decided to end the anthologies, because Solo didn't make the money that it was supposed to, because they had to spend twice as much to make it.
Yeah.
And so it really is one of those things where you were damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So I think, but I am, again, happy with the direction that they ended up taking it personally.
And well, maybe I shouldn't say. I'll leave that to myself. I don't want to betray a source friend of mine. So let's move on. So let's see. You talk about how this film is one of the darker films to date. And I mentioned earlier how we might not have the Mandalorian without Rogue One. What else do you think Rogue One influenced in Star Wars, Laura?
I mean, when I look at something like The Mandalorian, I especially look at things like the episode in season 2 with Ahsoka Tano. Fans of Ahsoka Tano have known her to be one way and to sort of act and behave in one way, and then watched this episode of The Mandalorian and saw a very different Ahsoka Tano, not only in appearance, but really just in terms of like attitude and the way that she behaved. I mean, she definitely seemed to be pretty violent, and definitely seemed to be a little bit more, I'm not even sure what the right word is. Like, violent is really the only one that comes to mind. Enthusiastic in that sense than she was in something like Star Wars Rebels, where she seemed to be a little bit more calm than she was when she was a teenager growing up during the Clone Wars. So that was a very different interpretation of Ahsoka Tano. It definitely seemed to be a lot darker. And it's things like that I wonder if we would have gotten that same story if we hadn't had something like Rogue One to precede it and tell us a different, darker, more gritty story at the time that it did in 2016. I look at things like season 7 of the Clone Wars, and seasons 3 and 4 of Rebels are even a little bit darker for something that's considered a show for children. They definitely took on darker tones at the time. We had entire main characters killed off. So it was certainly one of those things that I think that did a lot of good for Star Wars. I think Rogue One had a great influence, and I think it's maybe giving some creators and some of the writers of the new content that we're getting to be a little bit more courageous and go a little bit darker and push the envelope a little more, whether that's into a darker story or a different genre or something of that effect. Just letting the stories grow and breathe and evolve in a new way.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. And it had to happen, the original trilogy is great for the original trilogy was, and yes, Empire Strikes Back is dark, but it's not dark. It's got elements to it, of course, with Vader and the father situation, all of that. But in the end, in Jedi, it gets resolved in a way more happy way, a more peaceful way in the end. So this, though, I think because that worked for the public at the time, the public now wants things that are more gray, wants things that have more complexity to them. And so to think you can do, the Ewok song and all of that and be fine with it, it's not enough for people who are fans of the series or fans of the franchise rather anymore. So you have to push the boundaries to make it more realistic, more gritty, more dark. I mean, we see this happening, on Star Trek as well. Star Trek in the more current iteration plays amongst the darker themes a little bit more. And so they have to, because we're changing a society that way. Kids are more aware of the darkness of the world at younger and younger ages. The amount of G-rated films has dropped dramatically over the last 20 years. So those are those things that you're seeing, and you have to appeal to that base. And certainly Rogue One was one of those things, and seeing all the other things that it influenced within Star Wars, that encourages me that where we're going with Star Wars is going to be even better down the road. So, yeah. All right. Where shall we go off to next? Oh, Laura?
I would love to look at some of this concept art that we had released earlier this week.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if some of this showed up maybe in like the art of Rogue One. It could be very likely that this would have showed up somewhere else. But from what I understand, this was a lot of storyboard in early concepts that we saw come out on Twitter. Some of these concept artists released a lot of their work and posted a lot of their work on Twitter this week. And it was just so interesting to see some of these early concepts that they came up with for Rogue One.
Yeah.
This could have had nothing to do with the script. This was probably more going for like the sort of feel and the coloring and the attitude that they wanted to convey with this film. So it, who knows where any of this would have come from. But like this one in particular, where we see the U-wing in the jungle, there's another shot here that we'll see later of the U-wing on the beach. It's just interesting that the U-wing has been in Rogue One all along. Of all the things to be a constant, it was the U-wing.
Yeah.
Which ended up being a really cool ship, I think. I love kind of the way that it moves, and it's huge. It's just like, it's gigantic. You can actually transport people in it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that one in particular is really cool. There's one, and that was from Vincent Jenkins, who was a concept artist on Rogue One. If you want to click on this next one, there's a Wookiee in this picture, and I'm not sure what planet they're supposed to be on in this one.
Is this? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, this is the one you're talking about.
Yeah, and this might be Jeddah, I think.
This looks like Jeddah to me. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like at one point maybe they were thinking that Chewbacca was going to be in this film. I don't know why. He would have been hanging out with Han at this time, but I saw this and wondered if this was like, I don't know, maybe this ended up being something that they used for Solo, although the Death Star wasn't in that. And then we've got twin sons. Like this is just an interesting concept of something that they came up with, again, by Vincent Jenkins. Oh no, this one is from Solo. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was like, wait, was there was that Jin and Chewie? I'm sorry. He was posting a lot of his work from both films this past week, along with Matt Alsop. He was posting a lot of the work from Rogue One and from Solo as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, this Finding the Look of Jeddah was another one that I really liked by Vincent, that I thought was interesting. Yeah,
let me get into the other one here that you have linked up so that people can take a look at this as we talk about it as well here. Let's see this one here. Is this the one? Yeah, this one here. You were talking about the U-wing there as well on the beach, as you were mentioning.
I mean, so something like this almost looks like it was like they took an actual like photograph of a war that happened somewhere in our past and swapped out the ship for this U-wing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I this is one of those things that they were working on trying to figure out what Jeddah was going to look like. Obviously, they went in a different direction, and maybe this ended up sort of being more of like something that they would have used for Scarif, but. Yeah. This was I just think that this is so cool. This was definitely a different vibe altogether. And when you look at things like this and you can kind of see where they took it eventually, when something like this was being, drawn or painted or created way early on, it's just kind of interesting, I think, to see how the sausage is made and these types of things.
Well, and the consistency we're seeing here, Laura, is destruction, ruins, this sparse kind of look to it all. Even the vegetation in the jungle shot we had of the U-wing earlier, is kind of sparse and its own thing. So certainly approaching it from that point of view as well. That's the mentality or the mindset that they want to go into. Let me see if we can bring up this other one. Yeah, this one here, this is Jeddah, right? This is a concept art for Jeddah?
Yeah, exactly. This is another one of trying to find more of the look of Jeddah. And this was really interesting because this was a lot closer to what we ended up actually seeing.
Yes,
and I like this sort of gigantic statue of the Jedi that ended up, what we finally saw in the final product was something that was like sort of in the sand,
right, buried in the sand
of the Jedi holding the lightsaber. Yeah, so this is cool. This is really neat to kind of see. We see like the marketplace and the stormtroopers standing around. So this was definitely an interesting to see the process and see how things were kind of created within the process of designing how this film would look and how it would feel. Definitely, you see a lot of the concepts of war. Yeah. Destruction was definitely, you mentioned destruction, but yeah, it just kind of. It looks like the intention from the beginning, like this was going to be a war movie.
Yep.
And I feel like that's what Gareth Edwards gave them. So, and then they ended up throwing a lot of it away, which is too bad. But this was I think that they knew where they were headed for sure. And it's sort of interesting to see how that, how it ended up changing.
I wonder if Gareth has a copy just like Zach did. I wonder if he took a copy of his own cut home. I wonder if he was able to sneak one out through the Disney censors. Who knows? But yeah, you're right. And let's look on to the left. If you look at the left, there's black smoke billowing out of those open window type areas. There's cracks on the brick wall to the right of the Jedi sculpture there. There's all this like grittiness on the ground, kind of water, musty type look to it all. Yeah, very much conveying the war aspect of it all for sure. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on there, Laura. All right, and what are we off to next?
Did you want to bring up some of Matt's work as well? Here?
Oh yeah, let's do that.
He actually had a lot more of the pictures. He put some posts up that each had like 4 pictures, and all of his was like black and white storyboards that he did. Matt is the lead concept artist and was the storyboard artist on Rogue One. And he posted some of his concept art this week on Twitter as well.
That looks badass. Look at that.
I know. Now, if you click on some of these individual photos, then you can kind of expand them. But this was
which one? This one here? I can't click. They don't click out on their own.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So no worries. So we can like I can definitely do that if you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, once again, a crashed ship, destruction, this feeling of aloneness, solitary, love this almost like green lightsaber light in the middle of the sky. Well,
that could have been the destruction of Jeddah too, where the beam came down from the Death Star. Yep. Oh, that's really cool. Actually, I like that. The one above on the left almost kind of looks like it would have been something that they may have taken from like concept art from The Force Awakens and made it into something for Rogue One. Like I'm not even sure what kind of ship that is there.
Yeah, good point. I love this. Is this Saw? Is it?
I think this is Saw. Yeah, an interesting concept of Saw. Oh, I like it. He's like on his throne.
Yeah, with his breathing apparatus nearby. Yeah, great point. Yeah, that looks like from the Death Star there going into Jeddah. And the irony that it would be so powerfully well done. And look around. Like there's nothing else around but that one mound. Just kind of showing you the desolation and the solitary nature of this film. And then these 4 X-wing coming out here as well amongst the smoke, escaping maybe from the destruction of Jeddah themselves. So really interesting stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, some more of the black and white storyboard stuff from Matt. Here we see on the right something that was a little more accurate to what we ended up seeing in Rogue One. I love that. Of the Dauntless hanging over Jeddah City. But some of this marketplace stuff, like looks like a much cleaner version of Jeddah. Even with the ATST walking through there, it definitely looks a little bit more like, it almost kind of feels like Galaxy's Edge. And I always wonder how they take what they do with sort of like unused concepts. Right. Because there was one like scene, I think it was in this past season of The Mandalorian, where I looked at it and I thought a lot about the Secrets of the Empire VR experience that you do with the Void. A lot of it felt a lot like that in one of the episodes. So some of this I think does get reused, but a lot of this kind of looks like, I think, like Galaxy's Edge in black and white.
Yeah, and also look, we don't see this scene, right? The Imperial commanders down there hanging out, having a drink or talking strategy. That's not really a part of Rogue One. Down on the down on the planet's surface. That's mostly just the stormtroopers.
Exactly.
So the fact that this could possibly happen on Jeddah, it would give a completely different vibe to the film itself overall. So I love the fact that we're not getting them down there. This is just a concept art that they didn't use.
Yeah.
And of course, there's Saw's number 2.
We've got the Tognath, and then there's the tank that we see in Jeddah City. So this was definitely a very sort of different idea of Jeddah than we ended up getting. And I think some of that, the art of the officers sitting at the table, we got a little bit of that in like The Last Jedi on the casino planet, where they're sitting around and gambling. And then we get a little bit of that, I think, in season 2 of The Mandalorian, when they're sitting in the mess hall. And I think that's one of the scenes where Pedro takes his helmet off.
Right.
in that show. So we kind of see some of these things come back around in different media and get reused. So yeah, this was cool. But you definitely get the vibe, you know, from some of these photos, particularly this one with the tank.
For sure. Let's jump into some other ones here that you had tagged for us to take a look at from Matt Alsop as well and see where we go with these here. These are the storyboards that you were talking about. Here we go. Wow. This almost, I mean, the middle one here on the right this looks almost like Blade Runner. This looks almost Blade Runner-esque with those ships from the first Blade Runner. But I love this. Laura, are we getting scruffy nerf herders here? Are we getting nerfs? What are we getting here?
Yeah, this is one of the articles that I saw where they were talking about there were nerfs being herded in Rogue One in one storyline at some point. And yeah, that's apparently they look a lot like Buffalo, I guess.
I don't see Solo anywhere there. So there. But
exactly. So does he look like a nerf herder though? That is the question.
Good question. Yes. What do you think about this?
I think I guess this is supposed to be Jin. I wonder, like, did they know it was going to be a brunette from the beginning? They're like, no blondes. We don't bring blondes into Star Wars. But we've got her looking, you know, kind of leaning against the glass of the U-wing. That was something that we actually did see in Rogue One at one point. Not exactly like this, but it was definitely cool. And if that green is supposed to be the Death Star blast, then yeah, this was happening right around the same time. So it was definitely interesting to see how this compares.
Laura taking her shots about the blondes.
There's not enough blondes in Star Wars. There are in the High Republic, nowhere else.
All right, so then we have the troop movement here, and you know the rebels here, and it looks very similar to like sort of the Jedi look, almost in terms of when they were fighting on Andor. It's got that kind of planet or tropical planet armor look to it, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So they must have sort of taken that inspiration when they were planning on what the troopers would look like getting out of their carriers on Jeddah to go join the battle on the beach. But yeah, very interesting, very cool.
Is this them surviving? I mean, like that looks like a cash-in, and it looks like Jin is maybe helping him board after he's been shot or something.
You know, weirdly enough, it does look like it a little bit. I wonder if that's what this was.
Is this them surviving? I wonder. All right, let's go to the next one here. Oh, these are beautiful. I saw these this morning. These are gorgeous.
Wow.
Look at this. It's all I imagine these are Jeddah as well. The TIE fighter going by.
Different idea of what a nerf might be. I don't know.
Well, at least
I
a herder
maybe anywhere else. Yeah. But no, this is really cool. I wonder what, you know, we saw like characters in Attack of the Clones riding on a beast of burden carrying a stick like that.
True.
So that's kind of interesting to see something like that. They tried to bring it back. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I guess that's Jeddah there, and then of course this massive, it's almost reminiscent. Well, I guess it's another angle, right, of the shot we saw in a few storyboards ago of the destroyer over Jeddah. So yeah,
they couldn't decide how big they wanted the destroyer to be, so they're just like bigger and bigger and bigger until it's just the entire shot.
Yeah, sci-fi. We love size. We're size queens in sci-fi.
Exactly.
J2, we get a little bit of K2 Erso there, and a little more of Jeddah. And you're right. This is more of a bustling Jeddah. This is not a Jeddah that seems overall under war. It's cleaner.
Yeah, it's definitely cleaner. It doesn't seem like it's under siege. We don't see people sneaking around from place to place. They're kind of just out for a stroll, walking in the open. So yeah, definitely a different vibe altogether.
And Imperial officers again to the left here, hanging out, just having random conversations. So yeah, very interesting for sure. All right. Is there more? Oh, there might be more here. Oh, okay. So we get a little more stuff from this is like reminiscent of stuff from the beginning then. But this is very clearly how they shot the beginning, Laura.
Yeah, except for like Ben Mendelsohn, who looks a lot like more different for some reason. He just looks a lot darker. Like he had maybe a scar across his face or something.
Oh,
but yeah. Much more so what we got in the early shots of this film. I love the shot of young Jin that's right below this. But yeah, we had Krennic with the Death Troopers and Jin hiding in the grass, watching her mother and father confront Krennic. Yeah, very sad. Although I'm not sure what that bottom one was. Maybe this was Saw's compound. I'm not sure.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Because this doesn't look like it's the rebellion compound.
No.
Yeah, so that could be true. But this, I love this. Like, is this Jyn by herself waiting to get brought in to talk to Mon Mothma?
I would think this might be Wobani. I wondered if this was the prison, if they had her in the prison at some point before the rebels come and free her.
Right.
If this was the idea. They ended up giving her a roommate though, so that's fun. They didn't leave her alone. They stuck Ulan Musters in there.
That's true. That's true. Okay. These are the last ones for this bit. Here we see it's the size of a massive ship out in space. Then we see these Empire ships here rolling through. Are these geese? What are these? What kind of animals are these here, Laura? What are these things?
More nerfs. This is the nerfs with the white fur. Yeah. No, I don't know. This is.
You had me.
It does look like it could be geese. It's a flock.
Right.
But yeah, I love these middle two. Obviously, we're on Scarif with the palm trees. We've got the TIE fighters flying in and blowing up the ACT. Is that what it is? Yeah, sure. It's not NAT-AT, even though they call it a NAT-AT in the movie. But yeah, this is some fun stuff. I think I really like this.
Well, and the it's really interesting when you look at this. Though, let's go down. The outfits are very reminiscent of almost World War I.
Yes.
Or World War II with the helmets, the way they're designed. This looks nothing like what we ended up getting in the actual movie, because it feels so very similar to World War II. We do have helmets, obviously, and we do have armor there and what they're carrying, but overall, it doesn't have the overall vibe of it looking like a World War II film or something like that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, this was it was really, really cool. I enjoy seeing how these things kind of come together, and the fact that they put this information out there, whether it was in the Art of Rogue One book, maybe early that I don't have, so I don't know, or if this was all being put out there for the first time. Matt Alsop and Vincent Jenkins are putting their work out there for people to see this week. So that was exciting.
Very cool. What is it? Star Wars 2049. Yes, exactly. All right, and let's see. We got some Streamlabs that have come through. Let's address these, and we'll jump into the last section here real quick. 156 Impulse says, "I also want to see Qui-Gon talk to Obi-Wan. I know it will happen. I have hope." LOL.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. I actually think that Qui-Gon is more likely than Yoda. Like, if they decide not to go Yoda, you could really just use Qui-Gon for all of that. Yeah. If for some reason maybe the Yoda puppet isn't available, I hear he's a big diva. So that's a possibility, and I think it's a very real possibility. I think it's one of those things they're not going to tell us about. I think they're going to leave it as a surprise. They're not going to announce Liam Neeson as being part of the cast. Yeah. I could be wrong. I will go back and watch this, and this will not have aged well. But that's what I'm predicting now, is that it's gonna be our little surprise we get out of Kenobi.
Oh, how can it not happen? Hinting at, of course, today Ewan McGregor, that's making the rounds, how he responded if he had test screened with a young Luke Skywalker actor, and he said, I don't know. So the answer is yes. All right.
It's yes.
It's yes. Let's just move on. Paradox Nerd Tony says, "Hey guys, big fan of both of you." Thanks, Paradox. Very kind.
Thank you.
Do you think Asajj Ventress will appear on Kenobi? And would any of you guys be interested on my channel? I guess being on my channel. So, always reach out, Paradox. You never know. Depends on the situation and time on my end. I don't know about Laura herself, but Laura, what do you think? Asajj Ventress on Kenobi? Yes, no?
Unfortunately, I already said this, I think, on a different show. Somebody else asked about Asajj, and I hate to be the one to spoil it for you, but she's not alive at this time, unless they're doing some flashbacks, which I think is a very real possibility. But I don't think that that's going to be the case. Definitely check out the book Dark Disciple. It's a really, really good Star Wars book. If you're a fan of Asajj Ventress, please go check out that book. It's a great read.
I think, and especially because of the history of it, we talked about Asajj when we did our Clone Wars conversation a couple weeks ago. But Asajj Ventress, to me, is too big of a character to have her just appear in a series at this point. So I think you want to make a bigger deal about Asajj Ventress than having her show up in that way. Like Ahsoka Tano had her entire episode in a second season of The Mandalorian. So with Asajj Ventress, I don't know if bringing her into the first season of Kenobi is the way to introduce her. I think something else something bigger would be a way to go with her after the series has been established a bit more. We'll see. If it's only one season, it's only one season, but I just would feel weird about it. And I agree. And of course, Laura's correct. She's dead. So even a flashback, I think, would be a weird way to have Asajj Ventress, unless you're going to spin Asajj Ventress into something else, because that's what happened, right? Ahsoka Tano was kind of a backdoor pilot, that episode for this series that's coming out with Rosario as Ahsoka as well. So we'll see.
Yeah. And we've seen lots of characters come back to life in Star Wars. So I'm not saying it's totally out of the realm of possibility, but she had a pretty definitive ending.
Hey, Darth was cut in half. Maul was cut in half. But yeah, it's
very true. Very true. I stand corrected.
Curbside Prophet 13 says, something else I really love with Rogue One was no forced love story between Cassian and Jyn. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. They shared real intimacy at the end because death was imminent. Such a beautiful moment with them staring at each other and showing vulnerability and respect. Yeah, you wonder if, like you said, you'd read some snippets of possibly the original script where there was a wedding at the end. Maybe Gilroy came in and because I think if I've read correctly, according to him, Witta didn't have them dying. Gareth Edwards didn't have them dying at the end. So if he was the one that came in and was like, no, they all got to die. There's no love story. Boom. And maybe it was him. So do you like this idea that there wasn't a love story between Cassian and Jyn that was actually played out? Like there might have been feelings, but it wasn't played out.
I'm glad that it wasn't played out. And I actually, that sort of like intimacy that we see in the elevator as they're coming back down to the surface of Scarif was something that I actually wasn't wild about. It kind of took me out of it a little bit. Because the entire film, we kind of see them butting heads and we see a little bit of like them kind of coming together and like, you know, reconciling in a way, but I never interpreted it as romantic until that elevator scene. Right. And I didn't really think that they had like a ton of chemistry personally, but maybe that was just me. But I just kind of, what I was wanting to get out of this movie and what I had gotten up until that elevator scene was a war movie. And I just didn't see the point of taking these two soldiers essentially and like kind of forcing them into like a romantic relationship. It just would have been like, I don't know. There are other reasons in Star Wars. There are other couples in Star Wars that I would love to make them actually happen. And for Star Wars to sort of have its conviction and just be like, they're a couple, it's romantic. But in this, I really kind of didn't need it in this movie, going the entire movie without having that be a thing and then kind of forcing it at the end. But that's a personal opinion. I know that a lot of people, you know, they ship them and that's fine.
That's fine.
But yeah, that it just wasn't for me. I kind of just wanted like a sort of, you know, brothers in battle soldier relationship that didn't necessarily have to be romantic.
Look, Laura's a hard-hearted person, ladies and gentlemen. She got no time for love in the middle of war. She's got to handle her business, get things killed. She got no time for some cute Latino making his comments.
Yeah, I'm dead inside.
One Business Info says, with the show The Bad Batch coming up, do you guys think we will see Vader hunt down Jedis? Maybe a short scene or the clones meet a Jedi and try to hide them from the Empire this season or upcoming seasons. Yeah, Laura, this is great timing. What do you think about this? First, what's your answer to these questions here?
Sorry, was this a Kenobi question? I missed the beginning.
No, with the show Bad Batch coming up, do you think we'll see Vader hunting down Jedis? Maybe a short scene of the clones meeting a Jedi and trying to hide them from the Empire this season or any of the upcoming seasons of Bad Batch?
Maybe. I think when I thought that the Bad Batch was only going to be 6 episodes, I would have said no, because I don't think there was enough time to cover that story, and I think it's been covered in other places. But I saw today that there are 14 episodes listed on IMDb, so I think they'll have time, and I would guess that this show will be more than 1 season. Yeah. So I think that that's a very real possibility that it could come up, that we might see some of the Jedi on the run. I would really love to know where Quinlan Voss is during this time. I think it's been established that he's still alive. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would really like to pick up his story and figure out where he left off, and where he was exactly during Order 66, because it really wasn't clear.
That could be fun. That could absolutely be fun to have Quillen Boss be part of this thing for sure in the end. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, Laura Kelly will be joining the Geek Buddies as we review Bad Batch throughout the whole season, starting next week already, May the 4th coming up. So exciting. They're going to drop these episodes. We're going to talk about it, review them, and have them up for you all to enjoy. So get ready for that for sure. That is coming. So we'll find out if Vader's hunting down Jedis as we review these shows rather as they come up. All right, those are all the Streamlabs for now, Laura. Let's go to one last section before we wrap up the show here, talking about the Darksaber that was maybe referenced in Rogue One. Some of you might have missed this as Jyn is looking for looking through the structural engineering folder. You see, she reads off 6 project code names before finding Stardust, and one of them is Black Saber, close to Darksaber. Do you think this was just them having fun, or were they maybe planting the seeds for what we saw in The Mandalorian?
Yeah, it's hard to say because we definitely have seen them plant seeds in other aspects. I mean, we heard them talking about hyperspace tracking, and then we saw that show up in The Last Jedi.
Oh yeah, good point.
But I think that I remember being kind of confused because I don't remember it going by the name Black Saber. It was always Darksaber from what I remember. So yeah, it's hard to say if like Black Saber is something else, but it's supposed to be this very special lightsaber, which makes me think that there isn't more than one floating around out there, and that this is maybe just a different. And is it just a project code name, or is it like where it actually is referencing something else, or is it a really, really obvious project code name where they're like not even being subtle about what the project actually is, and they're just trying to hunt down the Darksaber? But yeah, it was an interesting shout out. You know, Rogue One is full of really fun Easter eggs.
Yes,
it's just chock full of them. Not only from Rebels, but from just everywhere in the Star Wars universe, but there are a lot of really fun Rebels ones. But Black Saber was one that definitely stood out, I think, for a lot of people, and definitely for me. Because, you know, at this point in the canon, we had seen it in the Clone Wars. Like that was its sort of intro was in the canon Clone Wars. And then I had to look up the date because I wasn't actually sure if Rebels was before or this season of Rebels was before or after Rogue One. I looked it up. It turns out it was the week before Rogue One was released in theaters. It was the episode of Star Wars Rebels where Sabine picks up the Black Saber.
Interesting.
I think it's not Malachor, it's Dathomir, I think is where they find it. And she picks it up and walks off with it. And then later in the season, we see her hand it off to Bo-Katan, who then obviously somewhere between the end of Star Wars Rebels and The Mandalorian loses it. And that's where we end up at the end of season 2 of Mando. So it was interesting to see it get a shout out here. The fact that Rebels brought it up 1 week before this movie was released is not a coincidence.
Yeah.
If you recall, I think Baby Yoda did Force healing in The Mandalorian 1 week before The Rise of Skywalker came out. So they tend to do these things, I think, on purpose. So this is one I think that will probably get... it would be interesting to see where they end up taking it in The Mandalorian and if it shows up anywhere else in the canon as we kind of hang out in this age of the rebellion, whether it be Kenobi or Cassian or something like that it might show up in one of those. Kenobi might be more likely, but I would be curious to see where else they take it in the story, whether it be in the future or in the past. Yeah,
are these the plans that Giancarlo Esposito has for attacking Mandalore? Is this the Purge? Is this before when because the Purge happens around the time of Rogue One, but we don't know if it's before or after Rogue One, right? From what I understand timeline wise. So are these the plans that got him the Darksaber, or are these the plans that he used when he attacked Mandalore, or his plans to attack Mandalore before he does them? So very interesting timeline wise where this thing lands when you're looking at it. So anything's possible, I imagine. So
that is an amazing theory, and I totally did not even think about that. But I feel like that has to be it. That it was just the project code name for the siege of Mandalore, the destruction of Mandalore, essentially. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that makes me excited. Okay, cool.
if they could, if they go back and reference it in the Mandalorian, oh my God, I'll lose my mind. I'll lose my mind.
Yeah.
All right, and then of course we should talk about the Andor series. It is, as we mentioned it already, it's coming up. It's starting to shoot now over there in England. Walk us through this real quick, Laura, before we wrap up the show here, because it's obviously a very strong connection and tie to Rogue One.
Exactly. So this prequel series to Rogue One is going to be set in the formative years of the rebellion, according to one summary that I read. Those formative years are apparently about 5 years before Rogue One. Which I'm really excited about because that's the same timeline that Star Wars Rebels falls on, which makes me think that there might be a tie-in somewhere and I might get to see my favorite characters in live action. Who knows? We'll see. Just putting it out there in the universe. But the show is going to premiere in 2022. That's what all of the sources are saying right now, which is interesting because it did start filming, we think, back in November. There's a very real possibility that it could wrap filming or wrap principal photography, at least in like the next couple of weeks even. So it'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye on that and see exactly when those things are announced or if they are announced. But it is filming right now in England. From everything we know, we saw some footage of it, I think, aired at that Disney Investor Day back in November. And yeah, according to IMDb, season 1's going to be 12 episodes. So the fact that they're setting it 5 years before Rogue One makes me think that we could potentially get more than one season out of this. We've heard things like the ObiWan show referred to as a limited series. I think they've referred to like the Ahsoka Tano show as like an event series. They really haven't been clear exactly what type of series, if it's going to be limited or something with Cassian, but I think that they could probably keep it going for a few years if they're going to set it that far back from Rogue One. And yeah, right now we don't have a full cast list yet, but we know it's going to star Diego Luna, Alan Tudyk, Genevieve O'Reilly is going to be returning as Mon Mothma. They'll all be reprising their Star Wars roles. And then, as John mentioned earlier, we'll have Stellan Skarsgård joining the show. Fiona Shaw, who many might know from Harry Potter. She plays Mrs. Dursley. And then Denise Goff and Adria. Is it Ariona? Yeah, I think it's Ariona. So yeah, that's our cast so far. We don't know a whole lot else. Hopefully we'll get a little bit more information. I know at one point, I think that there were casting calls put out there for like a young Hispanic boy and a young Hispanic girl. So maybe they were looking for like a younger version of Cassian and like a sister is what people were speculating. So who knows where that will come into play in the story. But those roles haven't been announced yet. And then, yeah, the last thing I think we know is that Tony Gilroy was set to be the showrunner of this show. Tony Gilroy is the person who directed all of the reshoots of Rogue One, but he ended up having to drop that showrunner title because of COVID. Back in April of last year, he couldn't travel to the UK because of coronavirus. And so now journalist and producer Stephen Schiff is stepping in as showrunner of Andor.
I didn't know journalists could become showrunners. That's an awesome situation. I mean,
yeah, I think he worked on The Americans. That was like one of his like more recent producing gigs as a TV producer. But before that, yeah, he was like a writer for Vanity Fair. Go figure.
With Star Wars actress Kerry Russell in The Americans there as well. So kind of works out.
It all comes around.
Yeah, it always does. That's for sure. So yeah, and it's going to be 12 episodes. So that's exciting. It's not going to be the 6 or the 8. 12. That gives us a lot of time to really dive in. And that's essentially longer than a movie. If these are all half an hour, that is longer than your standard Star Wars movie. So that's exciting to think about how much more we're going to explore the world before we get to Rogue One. So it's bound to be a little more grittier and darker than people than we got. Than any of the other things besides Rogue One. So that excites me on so many levels. And get to see a young Cassian Andor. I'm all about it. Let's make it happen. Come on. You don't have to DH him. You know, Brown doesn't frown. We hang around for a while. Just let you know for Diego. All right. Laura, I think that's it. I don't see any more Streamlabs or Super Chats. So let me just thank everybody who joined us live tonight. We had so much fun revisiting Rogue One. The 90 minutes flew by talking about this movie, as it always does when you talk about things that you love. You guys are fantastic for joining us. If you're watching us later, thank you as well for watching our breakdown of Rogue One. Laura, any what do you want to plug? What you got? Any final words about Rogue One?
No, this is still my my number one favorite Star Wars movie. I imagine it's going to hold that title for a long time. So I was happy for a chance to talk about it. And I'm looking forward to more Rogue One related media. But yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can find me at shutup_Laura. That's my handle on Instagram as well. The show that I host with my friend Alice is Force Toast, a Star Wars Happy Hour. That's our audio podcast that you can follow on Twitter at Force Toast Pod. And then, as John mentioned earlier, I am going to be joining the Geek Buddies for Bad Batch reviews coming up soon. So stay tuned for that.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun dive back into Star Wars with Laura Kelly for sure. The three of us, we're a motley crew, so Laura keeps us classy. That's for damn sure. You guys can follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram. Please do me a favor, like this episode, hit that thumbs up button, leave a comment down below. Likes and comments always help raise the visibility of a show like this. And look, trying to get this Star Wars show seen by as many people as possible. So you sharing it on your social media is a way of telling your friends and family that you approve of this content, approve of this show, and maybe they'll come aboard the Jedi Way train and come aboard the Outlaw Nation train as well. So remember to subscribe to the channel down below as we keep marching to cross that 17,000 subscriber mark as we head to 20,000. Trying to get to 20,000 by the end of July. That's the goal. So let's if you haven't subscribed yet and you've been enjoying the content, please feel free to do so and hit that bell so you know when we're dropping new things for sure. And just to reiterate one more time, Laura Kelly joining us on the Geek Buddies for those Bad Batch reviews. So look for those next week when the episode drops. Can't believe it's already May, Laura. What the hell? 2021 is steaming down the tracks for sure.
It's crazy.
All right. And what do we got to tell them as we wrap up here, Laura?
We got to tell them that until next time, remember, your focus determines your reality.